The footballer Ched Evans declares his overwhelming relief as he's cleared at his retrial of raping a 19-year-old woman in a hotel room 5 years ago. Good evening. Ched Evans spent 2.5 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. With new evidence to put to a retrial, he convinced a jury that he didn't rape the 19-year-old woman who'd accused him. Also tonight, the former Defence Chief, Lord Bramall, has had an apology from the Metropolitan Police Chief after the investigation of child abuse allegations against him. So why hasn't the former MP Harvey Proctor, who was also investigated and says his life was ruined, had a similar apology? He's with us live. We meet the mother of Jermaine Baker, who was killed by armed police as he was committing a crime.
He wasn't the only person in that car, so he should not be dead. He should be in prison.
And at 7:30 in Unreported World, how gay refugees from the Middle East have fled war only to be persecuted for their sexuality by other refugees. So, the footballer Ched Evans has been acquitted of raping a woman in a hotel room, declaring he was overwhelmed with relief. The Welsh international striker had originally been found guilty of raping the woman in May 2011, but his conviction was quashed after he'd served half the 5-year sentence. Today, a jury at his retrial cleared him of the same charge. Our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davis was in Cardiff Crown Court.
When the judge told Ched Evans this afternoon that he could leave the dock, he went straight over to the public gallery where his girlfriend was sitting, and they stood together and hugged for quite some time, crying. This has been a hugely controversial case over the years, and it is so again tonight, as the police say they are now investigating the naming on social media of the woman at the centre of this case. She has the right to lifelong anonymity, but she's been named in the past and has been forced to move home, it's understood, on several occasions. For Ched Evans and his supporters, it's been a long campaign to clear his name, and it comes at the end of a trial during which, unusually, detailed accounts have been given of other sexual encounters involving this woman. Just as they entered court 10 days ago, so they left, hand in hand, saying nothing. Ched Evans and his girlfriend Natasha Massey, just minutes after the footballer broke down in court, cleared of a rape he'd previously been convicted for. His statement, relatively brief, and read out by his solicitor.
In the early hours of the 30th of May 2011, an incident occurred in North Wales that was to change my life and the lives of others forever. That incident did not involve the commission of a criminal offence, and today I am overwhelmed with relief that the jury agreed.
The story of Ched Evans is well known. The former Sheffield United and Wales striker who 4 years ago was convicted of raping a 19-year-old woman in his hometown of Rhyl in North Wales. A media storm followed after the young woman was identified and abused on social media. Then came the public outcry over his attempts to return to professional football after serving 2.5 years in prison.
Even though I've been released from prison, I am determined to continue the fight to clear my name.
It was a well-funded campaign. A £50,000 reward was offered for information leading to his acquittal, and earlier this year he was at the Court of Appeal to see his conviction quashed after new information emerged. There was no evidence, said a judge today, it was linked to any reward. The information came from two men who had sex with the 19-year-old around the time Ched Evans was accused of raping her. It's rare for a complainant's sexual history to be put before a jury in a case like this. But these new accounts of the woman's sexual conduct were so similar to that given by Ched Evans that the Court of Appeal deemed them relevant. It was in May 2011, in the early hours, when a friend of Evans, Clayton MacDonald, brought the woman back to this hotel room. Mr. MacDonald was previously cleared of raping her. While they were having sex, Ched Evans walked in. The prosecution claimed he felt entitled to have her and that she was too drunk to consent. But the defence offered a picture of a sexually confident woman who liked to take the lead during sex. They argued that just because she couldn't remember anything, it didn't mean she'd been incapacitated, and Evans reasonably believed she wanted sex. Jurors were told drunken consent is nevertheless consent, and after 3 hours of deliberations,
the jury cleared Ched Evans of rape.
Thanks go too to my friends and family, most notably my fiancée Natasha, who chose, perhaps incredibly, to support me in my darkest hour. Whilst my innocence has now been established, I wish to make it clear that I wholeheartedly apologise to anyone who might have been affected by the events of the night in question.
What now for Ched Evans? Back to football, said his spokesman, as his club, the League One side Chesterfield, said they can now all move forward.
The former head of the Child Sexual Abuse Inquiry, Dame Lowell Goddard, has strongly denied a newspaper report alleging that she'd made racist remarks, describing it as totally false. And in a further development, it's emerged that Lord Bramall has now received a formal apology from the Met over the time it took for the investigation against him to be dropped. Others who were wrongly accused are now demanding similar apologies, as our senior Home Affairs correspondent Simon Israel reports.
Dame Lowell Goddard's reputation has taken a hammering since her resignation in August as chair of the Child Sex Abuse Inquiry. The Times went even further today, alleging misconduct and racism, attributing to her the remark that Britain had so many paedophiles because it had so many Asian men.
These are very serious allegations, which of course Judge Goddard denies. On the Home Affairs Select Committee, we've invited her to give oral evidence to us just on the future of the inquiry's work, its scope, its structure. That would also obviously give her the opportunity to respond more fully.
Today, that's exactly what she did, in a 4-page statement in which she said,
"I have never used racially derogatory language. I was never warned by a senior unnamed official that you can't say those things in our country. I never expressed shock at the number of ethnic people in Britain."
There were suggestions too that those high up in the Home Office, including Theresa May, were made well aware but did nothing. The department would not comment directly, but one source told me there is a question of who knew what and when, and whether that ever reached ministers and senior civil servants. It all adds to a sense of foreboding about an inquiry that some believe has lost its way. The same is being said about the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, who had refused to apologise to those targeted in a failed VIP child abuse investigation. The former head of the British Army, Lord Bramall, was one.
I can't apologise for carrying out an investigation into a serious allegation. That's our job. That's what we're here to do.
But the way
I've already expressed, as we have, regret.
This week, Sir Bernard visited the 92-year-old to say sorry after receiving a highly critical report on that inquiry known as Operation Midland. Lord Bramall is reported to have said that the police knew very early on he was innocent. One highly placed police source described Operation Midland to me as a complete disaster, not helped, the person added, by the Commissioner Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, refusing all advice to shut down the investigation at a much earlier stage. The Met has declined to comment. Harvey Proctor, an MP in the 80s, was another on that list of suspects. 3 days ago, he received this letter from the Metropolitan Police, wrongly identifying him as still an MP, before requesting a meeting soon.
Once the final report has been received, the Commissioner would welcome the opportunity to meet with you privately to discuss the report.
The report has yet to be finalised. No date has been set for publication. But already the Met is drawing up a strategy to deal with the fallout of what's anticipated to be severe criticism of an historic abuse inquiry which went after public figures.
And Harvey Proctor joins me now. Are you going to go to this meeting with the Chief Constable, and do you think he's going to apologise?
If he meets my requests, which I think are perfectly sensible requests, I've never asked for an apology. I've said before that I would not accept an apology from that man.
Why not?
Not worth his words.
Now, you say your requests. Your key request is that you should see the bits of the report that are about you.
It is Sir Bernard who has requested a meeting with me to discuss the Enriquez report. There's no point in having a meeting unless I see what he sees in respect of myself. I don't want to see confidential information about anybody else, but I do want to see things in the Enriquez report about me, Operation Midland, and any relevant recommendations Sir Richard has made.
Now, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe is leaving his job early. Perhaps
as a result of this, as a result of knowing...
We don't know, do we? But
I know. As a result of knowing the damnation that is coming in Sir Richard's report.
Well, I mean, that may have something to do with it, but I mean, we'll have to. That's just speculation at the moment, isn't it? But I mean, the point is, he is going. Perhaps he's tying up some loose ends here. I mean, when you say his apology isn't worth...
He should have gone months ago. He shouldn't have hung on in this way. Does no credit for him or for the Metropolitan Police that he's tried to protect his own skin.
Now, in the past, you've also called for Theresa May to consider her position, because she was the Home Secretary in charge of all this. Do you think she still should?
This inquiry was set up by Sir Bernard himself. He is the prime culprit in all of this. This inquiry should have been set up independently by the Home Secretary of the day, who was Theresa May.
So do you feel she still has questions to answer?
I think she has questions to answer on this and on the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse that was mentioned in your report.
What are the questions then for her?
Why did she set it up at the behest of a handful, half a dozen or so, members of Parliament? Why did she not appoint an inquiry into the Metropolitan Police's Operation Midland? It was because she had her eyes on the leadership of the Conservative Party.
And do you think that they are coming to you with the intention of apologising to you, or do you think you're treated differently to Lord Bramall?
I believe in the past, the Metropolitan Police and Sir Bernard has treated me quite differently from members of the real establishment, like Lord Bramall or Lord Britton. I don't know why he wants to see me. It can be either, perhaps, that he thinks that he needs to talk to me about Operation Midland in terms of an apology, or it may be just a continuation of his PR endeavours to protect himself and his career.
Well, do let us know. Harvey Proctor, thank you very much.
I will, of course.
Thanks. Now, in the last few minutes, the Home Office has issued this statement with regard to the whole question around Justice Goddard. The Home Office was aware of concerns about the professionalism and competence of Justice Goddard on the 29th of July. The Permanent Secretary advised the inquiry that they were independent and they should raise this directly with the chair. It's understood they did that. No formal complaint was made to the Home Office. Judge Goddard resigned on the 4th of August. Now, on the second day of the SNP conference in Glasgow, the party's newly elected Deputy Leader Angus Robertson warned Theresa May that her days as Prime Minister of the UK were numbered if she didn't come up with a special Brexit deal for Scotland. It comes the day after the First Minister and party leader Nicola Sturgeon said she might call the second independence referendum before the UK leaves the EU. Our political editor Gary Gibbon is in Glasgow.
Well, here today on the platform, you heard speaker after speaker exalting the whole idea of no controls on immigration, unlike some other conferences I've been to recently. There was an overwhelming majority in the hall for an anti-Brexit motion. In fact, overwhelming majorities are something you see quite a bit of in this particular hall, because this is a party that Nicola Sturgeon has a pretty strong grip on. And of course, yesterday, Nicola Sturgeon told them in there that what she wanted was a deal for Scotland on Brexit that makes sure that Scotland somehow, if not the whole of the United Kingdom, then Scotland itself stays in the single market. She drew short of actually committing to a referendum 100% in the circumstances of not getting that. So when I caught up with her earlier, I asked her to do just that, to commit.
I think if Scotland faces the prospect of being taken out, not just of the EU, which was bad enough given that we didn't vote for that, but finds itself being taken out of the single market with all of the implications that would present for jobs and trade and the economy generally, then yes, I do think Scotland would have the right at that point to decide.
I wasn't asking you whether you'd have the right. Would you do it? Is there automaticity? Can you with honour not let Scotland have an independence referendum?
I think that would be almost a duty of mine to allow Scotland to decide.
Is a duty.
But I'm not.
Is it automatic?
Look, I'm not trying to dodge your question here. I'm trying to genuinely. No, I'm not. Try to genuinely address your question. I said the morning after the referendum, the EU referendum, that I thought it was highly likely we'd have another independence referendum, and I still think that's the case.
The reason I was trying to pin down the language there was because back in London, people in Theresa May's government say they can hear wriggle room in what you're saying, and they think it's bluster.
It's a bit rich for anybody in the UK government to accuse anybody else of wriggle room. They're wriggling all over the place. And
they say they hear bluster.
Well, that'd be a very daft conclusion for them to reach. And, you know, Theresa May only needs to look at her predecessor, you know, who blustered his way through an EU referendum and lost it. So if Theresa May thinks I'm bluffing, she's wrong, because this is not a game of bluff. It's not a game of chicken. This is a really serious situation.
At the heart of your pro-European argument is that it would be madness for a country to rupture its relations with its main market.
I don't. The question
you know where I'm going with this.
Well, it's blindingly obvious where you're going with it. You're not very subtle.
But a lot of people would say that's what Scotland would be doing.
But it wouldn't.
From your perspective, piling one mistake on top of another.
This is an absolutely false argument, and anybody who doubts that just has to listen to what Theresa May and David Davis are saying to Ireland right now. David Davis went to Ireland just a few weeks ago and said to the Republic of Ireland, an independent country with massive trading links to the UK, he said in terms, you don't have to choose between the EU and the UK, you can and should have both. So you can't say that to Ireland and come to Scotland and say something different.
When you're making the argument about the importance of the single market and the rest of it, I've noticed you often invoke the very same organisations who said that Scottish independence would be economically harmful.
Such as?
The IFS, the National Institute for Economic and Social Research.
These are independent organisations. Sometimes they'll say things I don't agree with. Sometimes they, and that's, you know, I'm about to sort of be frank on behalf of my profession here. Sometimes we pick and choose the
yes, I think that's very frank.
We like, but the fact of the matter is, people like you used to tell me in the independence referendum that what the IFS said absolutely had to be taken as read. So,
and they were bang on the oil price, and you put out some figures to people that were best possible gloss, and have proved to be wrong.
Look, the projections we made for the oil price were actually lower than the ones that the Department of Energy and Climate Change made for the projection of oil price. But of course, both of us have been proved to be wrong on that.
You know, in the past there have been some figures in Europe who have been very resistant to the idea that what they would call separatist or breakaway nations get allowed back into the European Union. Have you had any private assurance from any leaders with those sort of views, like, say, the leader of Spain,
I haven't gone
that Scotland would be allowed back in if you'd been in a position where you'd fallen out?
Gone at this stage looking for those kind of absolute assurances, because we're not at that stage. Well, look, we're not at that stage yet, but what I have had from everybody...
You're starting down that path, and you could be there soon.
I haven't chosen to be in this position. We're navigating our way through a set of circumstances that are not of our making. What I have had from everybody I've spoken to in Europe is a real understanding of Scotland's position, and a real warmth towards Scotland, and a real sense that it would be wrong for Scotland, having voted to stay in the European Union, if it chose to become independent, for somehow that was not to be a possibility.
Nicola Sturgeon. Now, he's lagging further in the polls, but the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has hit out at what he calls a global power structure rigged against the people. Last night, Mr. Trump accused Hillary Clinton of guiding an elite that deliberately slants the economy against the working class.
The Clinton machine is at the center of this power structure. We've seen this firsthand in the WikiLeaks documents, in which Hillary Clinton meets in secret with international banks to plot the destruction of U.S. sovereignty.
But this afternoon, President Obama, speaking at a Hillary Clinton rally in Ohio, hit back at Mr. Trump.
This is a guy who spent all his time hanging around trying to convince everybody he was a global elite. Talking about how great his buildings are, and how luxurious and how rich he is, and flying around everywhere. And all he had time for was celebrities.
And tonight, the Washington Post published new allegations from a woman accusing Donald Trump of sexual assault in the early 1990s. His campaign said Kristen Anderson, a photographer, was making the whole thing up. Now, the family of a man who was shot dead by police in North London say they feel betrayed by the investigation into what happened. Jermaine Baker was part of a plot to free a prisoner when he was killed by armed police. While no real weapon was found, a replica gun was discovered in the back of his car. But his family are furious that an officer facing allegations of gross misconduct has been allowed to retire before any potential disciplinary proceedings take place. They've given their first television interview to Simeon Brown.
It's left a big hole in our family. It's like my jigsaw's missing. My jigsaw's all muddled. And the same with his child. You know, she asks for him every day. You know, she just doesn't sort of come to terms with the fact that he's not coming back.
He was Margaret's eldest son and the joker of the family.
He was always playing tricks on us and doing things to us. Yeah, that's one of my favourite memories of him. You know, his smile, it would light up a room.
Jermaine Baker, a son and a father of two, was shot dead by armed police last December. The 28-year-old was part of a plot to release a convicted criminal from a prison van in North London. Two others in the car were later convicted. A replica gun was found in the back of the car. Jermaine was sitting in the front seat and the only one to lose his life. Margaret put her faith in the IPCC, the body which oversees the police complaint system, to find out why. But her early confidence has turned into a formal complaint.
He should be in prison. He shouldn't be dead. You know, he wasn't the only person in that car, so he should not be dead. He should be in prison. You know, so that's why I need to know what happened that day.
The officer who took the fatal shot was placed under a criminal investigation. But last week, the senior officer in charge retired, despite the unanswered questions over the operation. Margaret, speaking about her son's death for the first time, told us the IPCC did not do enough to stop it and left the family to take the matter to court alone.
We went to court last week because one of the officers in the case was allowed to retire, and I felt like they publicly humiliated us by not taking on that case and letting us fight something that they should have done. It was their job to do, it wasn't our job to do. Obviously we lost the case because we didn't have their backing, and this man was allowed to retire even though he played a major part in this investigation.
The IPCC admitted that they did initially support the view of Mr. Baker's family that the officer should have been suspended to prevent the retirement. But prior to the hearing, their position changed. The IPCC Commissioner, Cindy Butts, said,
"It was the investigators' opinion that the allegations, if proved, would meet the lower threshold of misconduct only and could not lead to dismissal. It would be irresponsible for the IPCC to pursue a legal challenge with very little prospect of success."
In recent years, hundreds of police officers facing serious complaints have retired. This makes it impossible for them to face disciplinary action. There has been little faith in the IPCC in this part of North London where Jermaine is from. In the summer, Jermaine was remembered alongside some of the other high-profile cases involving police contacts that had sparked civil unrest. Last year, Theresa May announced a review into deaths in custody with the Charity Inquest, who was supporting Jermaine Baker's family to find answers. At a time, they're being asked hard questions.
What does justice look like for you? Because many people who are watching this will say that they feel no sympathy for Jermaine.
We have a British justice system, right, and it doesn't end at the end of a gun. At the end of the day, people have to answer to the force that was used that day. Was that force necessary? We need answers to that.
The officer who fired the fatal shot is on bail. A decision on possible criminal charges will follow the conclusion of the IPCC investigation. But again, another family has lost their trust, in addition to losing their son.
Now, they're calling it Black Friday. Thais are dressed in black today, with many in tears of mourning for King Bhumibol, who died yesterday after a 70-year reign. The king was revered by many as a father figure, and many Thais have said they feel bereaved. He was, they say, the heart of the nation. From Bangkok, Jonathan Miller reports.
In the sultry heat of a Bangkok afternoon, the convoy bearing the body of King Bhumibol Adulyadej, accompanied by his heir apparent, made the short journey from the hospital where he died to the Grand Palace. As tributes flowed in from around the world, tens of thousands of his tear-streaked, grief-stricken subjects lined the route, kneeling in reverence. Down by the magnificent Grand Temple complex, a multitude so vast it was impossible to move. Thailand, the land of smiles, now a sea of sorrow. The mood is black. This is not the state-mandated mourning you'd see in North Korea. For Thais, it's personal, genuine bereavement. It's as though they've lost their father. Earlier, many had taken part in Buddhist funeral bathing rites, including Thailand's military ruler. Over 70 years, King Bhumibol had been a constant as governments came and went. Today was declared a national mourning holiday after most had already gone to work. As they've been mourning, a problem has emerged, an unexpected turn. For today, Thailand is a kingdom without a king. A couple of days ago, a constitutional expert here explained to me that it would be like it works in the United Kingdom, where the king is dead, long live the king. The coronation, a mere formality. But Thailand's heir apparent appears to want to wait. It's not clear why, but strict lèse-majesté laws, rigorously enforced, criminalise public speculation. Tonight, Crown Prince Maha Vajiralongkorn presided over the bathing of his father's body in the palace. He's not loved like his father was. Today, he will have seen just how deep that love was.
Tonight's main news, the footballer Ched Evans has been cleared of raping a woman in a hotel room 5 years ago. In a moment, Unreported World meets the gay refugees from the Middle East who are now being persecuted here in Europe over their sexuality. But first, the weather.